Hi, I'm Sharon Rundle-Teely. I'm from Griffith University and I am your MC for tonight. But tonight we have a very special guest here to do a welcome to country, and I'd like to introduce Auntie Bridget to the stage.
Wanya Nullam, everyone. Hey, I want to say thank you to all of you for actually being custodians and caring for country and looking after, Bunjil, the koala. So big round of applause for you guys because you do a great job. And I just want to see, more representation, from my mob here. Where are they? No. But so my name is Bridget Chili. I am a traditional owner from here. I identify as a Marula, Jurunga woman within the Gubbi Gubbi Nation and language group. So we are the Marula people. We are the people of the fishing nets. And we live on Jurunga country. It's a country within the Gubbi Gubbi Nation. The Gubbi Gubbi Nation starts up north of the Burrum River, goes along the back of the Blackall Range to the Pine River. And there are 8 mob groups or 8 family groups that make up that one nation, one of which is Jurunga country. And that goes from Maroochy River to the headwaters of the Mooloolah River to Coochin Creek and 6 nautical mile out to sea country and that footprint. This is my grandmother's country. This is matriarchal country. That doesn't get old. I love saying that. So my grandmother, she was our last senior law woman here on country, and I get to take that role up. Big shoes to fill, but I've got to do the best I can. So I'm going to do a welcome to country. I've got my clapsticks here. And, I'm a little bit nervous, actually. But anyway, my family, actually, I'll talk about my mob. Make me feel a little bit better. So the Chili family. We are the oldest family here on the Sunshine Coast. Our feet have never left country since our time began here. Since the birth of the first drops of water of the Mooloolah River, our mob's been here. The reason why we're still here, and we weren't forcibly removed, is because of 2 pioneering families, the Petrie family and the Westway family. They actually wrote a letter to the Chief Protector of Aborigines requesting that they keep my family here, our bloodline here on country. And the Chief Protector of Aborigines said yes. So that's why we're still here. So I love that. And I was raised by my grandmother from 2 days old here on country. And it was the best gift my mum ever gave me. I reckon my mum took one look at me and went, nah, this one's trouble. But so I'm the eldest of my family. I've got 11 grandchildren, and it's not easy being the elder of my mob. But hopefully we'll see our mob here next year and, take part in all of this beautiful work that you guys are doing. I'm just going to sound these and let the old ones know that we're here. So Bunjil, that's our language word for koala. Barenga ye wanunganga ye ya wara uranga ye. Barenga ye wanunganga ye ya wara uranga ye. Barenga ye yap baranga ye ya wara uranga ye. Barenga ye wanunganga ye ya wara uranga ye. Warum bamuranga yiraka mamuranga yirobopuranga. On behalf of my ancestors, my old ones, country and the spirit of all there is that connects us here today, I welcome you to my native ancestral homelands. You're all very welcome. Thank you. Yoe.
Wow,
That was an amazing welcome. Thank you so much, Auntie Bridget, for coming out to welcome us all to your country. We're very, very happy to actually be here. So tonight we have 6 speakers to go through various initiatives and actions that people are actually undertaking here, not only to support the koala, but the wider biodiversity in this fabulous country that we're actually on. So this is the lineup to come through for the night. And what I actually invite and ask you all to do during the night is to work with Slido. And so for those of you that haven't worked with Slido before, I need you to actually take a screenshot of this. At any point during the night as questions come in, please enter them into the Slido for me. If you are a person who can't use the technology or doesn't want to, that's fine. Just give me a question on a sheet of paper. I will always be sitting down the front in between as the speakers speak. So we try and actually work through some of the questions at the end of the night, and then we take other questions away and try and bring answers back to you, because sometimes they're a little bit more complex than any person in the room here can actually answer. So anyone who works in conservation understands it's incredibly complex. It's not as easy as you imagine when you sit there and cry for help on behalf of any form of wildlife. And there are ways that we can all help make it happen better. So reporting koala sightings is one way you can show exactly where they live, and then that can help inform planning. And then we can all advocate, but we have to do that through certain lines and certain channels. So if you want to learn more about that, contact me about that, because yelling at any one individual in this room is not the way to achieve that. So I ask that everyone comes with the best of intentions to look after each other tonight. It is certainly part of my role here to make sure that we do it well. Now, I first met Kate when I started to get involved in the wider work across southeast Queensland Corner. I follow her and I am such a fan of her work. She is very passionate about what she does. She does absolutely amazing work. And I think with no further ado, I'm going to invite Kate Hofmeister to talk about just one of the many, many things that she works on. Thank you, Kate.
Very lovely introduction. Thank you very much. And a huge thanks to Auntie Bridget too for the beautiful welcome. Thank you. Okay, let's figure out how to work this. Here we go. Okay, everyone. Well, first of all, introducing myself. My name's Kate Hofmeister and I lead some of the threatened species conservation work that happens at Sunshine Coast Council. We are very fortunate in our team to have taken on the koala conservation plan about 18 months ago from the amazing Dr. Julie O'Connor, who developed the plan back in 2016 and had it endorsed by Council. The plan identifies 5 different desired outcomes that we need to see achieved on the Sunshine Coast in order to contribute to koala conservation. And so my talk tonight is going through each of those desired outcomes and talking about some of the projects that we're undertaking. Okay, so desired outcome 1 is building our knowledge about koala populations here locally. It's something that changes frequently, over the decades that we have koalas, and centuries that we've had koalas here on the Sunshine Coast. It is constantly changing, and what is important is having current knowledge. So our focus areas are understanding the genetic and functional connectivity across the landscape, understanding koala presence, and understanding disease prevalence. The current projects that we have underway is we undertake thermal drone surveys at reserves of interest where we have koalas reported. We have a University of Sunshine Coast connectivity study that Roman will probably talk about shortly that looks at an expert elicitation study that was done and a literature review. And this will inform the University of the Sunshine Coast and Sunshine Coast Council koala projects that we're working on at the moment. Now, to go into that in a little bit more detail, which again, Roman will speak to a little bit later on, but some of the grants that we've been able to receive more recently will allow us to do occupancy surveys at 180 sites across the coast, thermal drone surveys at 23 sites, fresh scat collection by the Detection Dogs teams at 23 sites, extraction of DNA for 220 samples, and analysis of the disease prevalence, the sex ratio, the dietary preferences, the dietary composition, genetic diversity, relatedness and inbreeding at each survey site, and ultimately give us some information about the genetic connectivity across our landscape. And I guess I wanted to point to the work that's been done in the macropod space by USC that does exactly that and looks at the connectivity and how strong or weak it is across the entire Sunshine Coast. Now, desired outcome 2 is koala conservation incorporated into our planning and policy processes. The focus areas for us at Council is that we're developing a new planning scheme at the moment, and so a lot of work is being done to in order to be able to integrate the state legislation into our local government planning and strengthen that. The recent projects that we've been working on in this space is providing feedback to the state government for the post-implementation review of the koala regulations, which we're hoping to see some really great outcomes from. Desired outcome 3 is a space that we've been really busy in the last 6 months or so, and that's koala conservation through partnerships and community engagement. So in the focus areas here for us are obviously community engagement, but also supporting community koala conservation delivery by our partners. So the current projects that we're delivering are the communication package that's been developed for all the South East Queensland councils, and you might see it on the right-hand side of the screen there. You can see that there's the koala, and each of the councils in South East Queensland have access to these resources. So we're providing a consistent message that's recognisable to our community, no matter where you are across South East Queensland. We held a dog fest, which is a wildlife aversion project working with dog owners last year. And we're going to be holding pop-up sessions over the next 12 months in our community to continue to teach dog owners and the dogs how to avoid wildlife and how to actively train recall for dogs. We've been encouraging our community to use Q Wildlife, which is the new sightings app that might be spoken about a little bit later on tonight. We have 2 amazing partnership projects, which I'll talk to in a second. And then obviously we're living in a wildlife-friendly biosphere here on the Sunshine Coast, but we also are talking with our biosphere neighbours to look at cross-biosphere projects so that we can scale up the conservation response. So our Dog Fest back in October, November last year was attended by over 2,500 people. People were participating in wildlife aversion training with their dogs, and we were able to train 29 dog trainers that operate here on the Sunshine Coast in wildlife aversion techniques so that generations of pets from here on out will have that trained into them in puppy school. So we're hoping that that will achieve a really good outcome in terms of reducing the interactions between our wildlife and people's dogs. We have a partnership with Hinterland Bushlinks, who are undertaking a huge amount of plantings on private land, also undertaking some work on one of our council reserves. And you might find Alicia down in the corner here, who will be happy to speak to some of the amazing work that they're doing with private landholders. And another partnership is with the fabulous team at Ecolaboration, who are doing some work at Kirby's Environment Reserve up in the hinterland. It's a 2-hectare site, and they're looking at lots of plantings, but also some surveys of koalas on site as well. So desired outcome 4 is minimising the impact of threatening processes on our koala population. Our focus area here is the restoration of important connective habitat, and we do this in a multitude of different ways. But the example that I've provided tonight is the incredible work by Spencer Shaw, who's in the crowd here, from Brush Turkey, who has been doing some restoration work up at Howes Knob at Reesville for the last almost 10 years now. And he's seeing some excellent results at that site, which is identified as it's quite a pivotal site up in Reesville for connectivity with a lot of the land for wildlife properties that have really great healthy koala populations. Other projects that we're working on is working towards a koala bridge up at Reesville to further support the connectivity for those koalas up there. We're doing post-bushfire koala surveys, and we did this summer with the Detection Dogs for Conservation team. And participating in the Healthy Land and Water Koala Threat Management Project as well, which you might hear more about over the next 6 months. And that's that image there is a bit of the telemetry work that was undertaken by Dr. Sean Fitzgibbons for us up at Reeseville. And desired outcome 5 is about advocating, educating, and leading by example. And tonight, that's why we're all here, to learn a lot more about what's happening in our region with koalas. So our focus areas here are with engagement with koala stakeholders and community, supporting our community to engage in koala conservation in however way is suitable for them, and participation in the regional working groups, which there are quite a few of in the koala space now. So our current projects is being involved in the Kids in Action program, which is all about kids teaching kids. And we did that in partnership with the Detection Dogs for Conservation team. You can see Billy up there, I think it was Billy, talking and having a chat with the kids about koala conservation and really inspiring them to take action in their area. Tonight's Koala Forum, and then participation in many community planting days and koala information events. For example, this weekend we've got a landholder koala information workshop up at Mary Cairncross Scenic Reserve. Okay, so I guess the question is, how are we doing this? What are we funded for? So we're very fortunate here on the Sunshine Coast that every ratepayer pays an environment levy, and the environment levy funds some of the work that we do in the koala space. We also leverage that budget to be able to attract grants and partnerships. And so this year we're delivering almost $700,000 in grants and partnerships, just through these partnerships with amazing community organisations that have great ideas and information and knowledge about what koalas need in their local area. So for anyone out there that is interested in partnering with council, I would really encourage you to come and have a chat with us about that. What I see as current gaps and things that I have questions about and things that I want to explore further is what's happening with disease with our koalas here on the Sunshine Coast. We want to explore the idea of, is active management required for disease, and that will need to be informed by the genetic studies that the university are doing here on the Sunshine Coast. Questions about koala vaccines, and we'll hear from Professor Timms tonight on that matter exactly. We have a lot of discussions and queries and questions and potential solutions for connectivity, which are important for our koalas. We need to be making really smart decisions with essentially a limited budget. And then finally, climate change and heat stress preparedness. What are we doing to respond to bushfire risk for koalas? So lots of questions that need to be answered over the coming time. And I've been given the wrap up, and luckily I'm on my last slide. So if anyone has any questions for me, has any great, brilliant ideas, my email is there, but I'll also be hanging around after the forum for any discussions that anyone would like to have. And thank you very much for listening.
It is always incredibly difficult when you've got the timekeeper staring you straight down saying yes, and she's right behind the line of sight here, which is amazing. Now, our next speaker, I've had the good fortune of knowing for a very, very long time, and I'm an incredible fan of the work that the Detection Dog team actually do. They're out there in the bushfires trying to find the hurt, injured koalas in super time. They work tirelessly and so, so hard. So with no further ado, Roman, could I invite you to come up to the stage, please?
I'll put my own timer as well. All right, thanks everyone for coming here, and I will go through it. So yes, I'm Roman. Good to have you here tonight to talk about koala, which is my very favorite subject. And I'm from the University of Sunshine Coast Detection Dog for Conservation. Would like to talk to you tonight about innovation that we've been pushing to help koala conservation in general. And I first wanted to say that all the data I'm going to present is, based on the hard work and passion of a very large dedicated team of students, volunteers, and staff, some of them here tonight. And so I wanted to acknowledge all their work and support. but also the fact that none of the research that we can present and none of the knowledge that we have can be collected as far as university goes without supporting collaborators, partnership, funding body that trust us to conduct some of the work. And again, many of them are here tonight. So thank you for being behind the work we do. So the team is basically joined university in 2015, and we have now 3 specially trained dogs and 2 in training, and about 20 of us human. We really need that for those hyperactive dogs. 5 human to 1 dog is a good ratio. And we do a lot of landscape surveys. So here you can see a map at the far end of the slide, and that represents about 4,700 dog survey that we've conducted since joining uni. And we're also doing drone survey, about 1,000 of them, and we've detected now more than 3,000 koalas through those. And also collected some koala poo, about 4,700 of them, and I'll tell you why we do that very soon. But first, my talk is about innovation, and why do we need to innovate? And news to no one in this room, koala are in trouble. In fact, I started studying them in 2006, and since then they've been classified as vulnerable and then endangered. So basically, we can't continue doing what we've always done because it's obviously not working. So innovation comes to play a part in that. The other thing is really typical and specific about koala is that they're extremely good at hiding. I'm sure you've seen that if you've done a koala survey before. And I don't know whether you've been able to spot koala in this picture, but if you haven't, don't feel lonely, because it's been proven that even experienced koala spotter miss about 3 out of 4 koala. So that's not good enough. So that's also why we need to innovate. So what are the solutions? Innovation number 1 that I want to talk about, of course, is about sniffing out solutions, so through the detection dogs. The second innovation is based on the fact koala are hot. And then I want to talk to you about those koala poo that I was saying I will get back to in terms of what we can do non-invasively to study koala. And this 4th innovation I won't have time to talk about, but please, if you're interested in sort of Bluetooth ear tag for koala and how to detect that through an app, come and talk to me at the end. So first innovation, sniffing out solution. And it's based on the fact that other koala are really good at hiding, and so it's hard to find a koala in the habitat. They poo a lot, so it's much easier to find their poo and their koala scats. And that's something that ecologists have done for many species that are hard to find. So good tip. Unfortunately, in the bush, it's still really hard to find those little brown things. It's hard to find them because we humans are looking through your eyes. But this is where the innovation comes from. What about if we were smelling with our nose instead of looking through our eyes? And of course, the good sniffer around us is the dog, and dogs love to work with us. So dog can pretty much find anything that's got an odor. And luckily for us, everything has an odor. The issue is that, of course, your dog at home can smell everything, but how are you going to know when it smells the smell that you want? For us, koala poo. Bit weird, but this is like that. So it's all about how to motivate your dog to talk to you about when it's found something you want, and enters the magic tennis ball. I'm going to try to play that.
You ready?
So this is Maya. This is our first detection dog. I was hoping you couldn't hear my voice, but it's very good quality and support that we have here. So you can hear me. So that's many years ago where I was trying to test how good Maya was. So we are training in our yard. She's basically very into the search because she really wants to play with her tennis ball, which is her reward. And we associated we associated the tennis ball with the scent. And the other characteristic of Maya that you can see with her interaction with the chicken is that she's really non-aggressive towards other animals, which is important when you work in national park. And you can see here she's just very happy that she's got to play.
Good girl.
And she is a good girl. So Maya is what we call a habitat detection dog, and we have a few of those dogs. And basically, what they've been trained on is to indicate and tell us where koalas, cats of any age are in the bush. And that enable us to know that koala are living there. And we do occupancy survey, so presence absence survey, and we also test mapping with those dogs. How good are they? Well, of course, we tested that because we are scientists. And we published that. And basically, we compared Maya and detection dog against the human doing the same survey. And we found that the dogs were about 150% more accurate and 20 times quicker. So very good innovation. Koala are also hot. And just to be brave, I'm going to try to play a second one. Working, that's great. So here is a drone survey. We're flying transect across a whole site. And when we see something that looks hot, we go and investigate it. We can get a good image from going around the tree. And then we can also zoom through our camera. And then we basically stay until we can identify that that hot blob is a koala and not a possum or a termite mound, for instance. So here you can really see there's no doubt it's a koala shape. You can actually see what the koala is doing, and a couple of times you can see them move and eat. So we tested as well how good those drones are, and we found that we reached 100% specificity and on average 80% sensitivity or accuracy. And we also can cover quite large area. So great innovation. Innovation number 3 is our non-invasive poo. And how do we do that? We train Billie Jean on screen here as a DNA detection dog. And basically what that means is that she's going to ignore any old koala scats and take us to only the freshest or the fresh scats. Now, why would we want the fresh poo, you may ask? Because we actually collect that poo and we bring it back to our lab, and we can actually extract a lot of information from that little scat. First thing, we do koala genetics. And it's great, Kate has already warned you about this. So we can actually tell whether the koala is male or female, calculate sex ratio at the population size. We can look at inbreeding and diversity, which are an indication of the health, genetic health of the population, if you want. We can also look between population, whether they are connected or isolated. So that's about all we can get from the koala DNA. But we can also get DNA from other things, such as pathogen, especially chlamydia, and microbiome. And then other colleagues across Australia are investigating the use of hormone for instance, breeding hormone and stress hormone, as well as diet. What are koala eating and what's the quality of their food? So lots and lots of information in that little brown poo. So basically what we're trying to do is to transform those innovation into our standard method of operating. And so we use detection dog and acoustic recorder, which I haven't mentioned today, but Kate has, to do occupancy survey. We then deploy the drone and the thermal imaging to do density surveys. And finally, our fresh cat detection dog and non-invasive molecular analysis enable us to understand the health of the koala populations. And we've been deploying those tools here in Sunshine Coast Council. So we've done in 2017 a large dog survey. We can see presence absence. Presence is green. And we also just recently did the acoustic survey. And as soon as the weather is good, we will start our drone survey and collect scats for genetic and other health indicator. So what it enables us to do is to know where koala are, the density of the population, so how many koala there are in those different areas, and their health. And we do that across the Sunshine Coast, but we also work with a lot of different partners across different questions and source of funding, and we can build a landscape picture of koala. So those are both the current sites and applied future potential sites. And as promised, I'm running out of time, so I will not talk to you about this fourth innovation that we're doing in collaboration with Griffith University. And basically it's about using this solar Bluetooth ear tag as a way to engage with communities so they can become the guardians of their koala. So if you want to talk about this or more about detection dog and anything else, please stay in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Raman. She managed to run out of time to talk about the most exciting project that's coming up. It's like, how did that happen? I love it. Okay, our next speaker I also met when I was out and about right across the southeast corner and got to learn a little bit about the fabulous work that they've actually been doing. I'm not sure why we've got it the Slido. Oh, sorry, it's just me having a brain moment. Keep putting your questions in. I am watching questions come in on the Slido app, so it's great to just see that they're coming in as you go. Our next speaker is David, who does absolutely fabulous work around tree planting and is just a great crusader for koalas. So if I can invite David to stage, please.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody, and good evening to all those people watching at home. I first want to just acknowledge that welcome to country that we received. How fantastic was that? So I can't see the person, but that was wonderful. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge the wonderful work done by Sharon and the Wildlife Watcher team, because not only for tonight, but for this whole program of koala forums that they put together, spreading the word, and it's really wonderful messaging. And as at Queensland Koala Crusaders, we're very proud to be able to partner with the Wildlife Watcher program and help get that information out to as many people as we can. Tonight, I want to begin with a quote, and it is a quote from Dr. Jane Goodall, and everybody knows who she is, and an amazing conservation crusader for many, many years. And she said, "What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." And it's a really potent message to begin what I want to share with you tonight, which is some ideas. I've got 3 ideas that I want to share with you tonight to help empower change, to influence change, and to help save the koalas. And the theme that I came up with, "It's not too late," came from a question that was asked at the previous koala forum that we attended in Logan, where someone asked, "Is it too late to start planting trees?" My answer then, and I wasn't part of the panel then, I was sitting down the front, jumping up and down, vibrating, "No, it's not too late. It's not too late." And I want to share some ideas with you about why it's not too late, and why we as a community, as individuals, as families, can do things to help the koalas, and what we might be able to do. The first thing is to think about the way we live. And the way we live involves all sorts of things. For instance, the way we drive. And the local governments right across southeast Queensland have done a very good job in putting signage up in areas where there's likely to be koalas crossing roads. And it's about, as we drive through those areas, not only just slowing down, but being aware of the fact that there might be koalas in the area, and that at certain times of the year, particularly in breeding season, koalas are likely to cross the road. So we want to be aware of them so we can avoid them. If by unfortunate means we happen to collect one, hit one, call a rescue organisation. We've got Wildcare here. There's other rescue organisations around southeast Queensland that do a wonderful job. So if that happens, call somebody. The other thing is our dogs. We love dogs. Linda and I are between dogs at the moment, but we all love dogs. We've got dogs, and dogs are cute, and they're a really important part of our lives. But they can also be very damaging to our local wildlife, particularly koalas. We all know that dogs love chasing things, and koalas are not particularly good at getting out of the way of a dog. Something like 70% of dog attacks on a koala end up being fatal to the koala. So if we can think about ways that we might be able to separate our dogs from koalas, either by having them inside at night or having them in an enclosure, or fencing in a way that the koalas and the dogs are not going to be coming in contact so much. If we're out and about, going for a walk in the park, have the dog on a leash so it can't just run off and do what the dog wants to do. And the third thing about that is making our yards koala safe. And that can be as simple as if a koala can get into your yard, give them an escape route. And that can be a pole leaning up against the fence. It could be a rope. It could be simply a hole or a gap in the fence where they can get out again. Many of us have got swimming pools. Koalas can swim, but unfortunately, if they fall into a swimming pool, it's very hard for them to climb out again. But if you can leave some sort of a rope or a pole or something in the pool that a koala can get hold of and crawl out, it increases their chances of survival dramatically. Also has all sorts of other benefits too. I mean, cane toads will use the same mechanism to get out of the pool, and who wants to be cleaning out dead cane toads from your skimmer box? You know, you don't want stuff dying in your swimming pool. So there are simple things that we can all do with the way we live that can help us and help koalas. The second idea, and this is a really important pillar for what Queensland Koala Crusaders does, and that's planting trees. And I would like to put out a plea to local landowners, private landowners. If you're interested in planting trees, come and talk to us because we can help. We've got resources to plant trees. We've got relationships with nurseries and suppliers of tree planting equipment. And we've also got the funds to help with private tree plantings. It can start with as little as putting a tree in your backyard if you've got a small backyard. If you've got a large backyard, you can put a few trees in. If you've got acreage, you can put a corridor in. And corridors are great because corridors allow koalas to be able to travel. It's a point of refuge for them, and it also is a food source. So if we can do that on larger plots of land, we're working with a wonderful landowner at the moment in the Sanford area that joins a public reserve, and we're working with them to help enhance the koala habitat there. So in time, that will give the local koala population room to expand. So put your trust in trees and join us in that campaign. We've got lots of information down the back or on our website online. If you want to know more about how we can help, we'd love to have a conversation with you. The last thing I want to share with you is an idea about becoming a koala ambassador. And I would like everybody to consider becoming a koala ambassador. We're all here because we understand the importance of koalas and we want to help. But we are only a small percentage of the population. There's a whole mass of people out there that don't have our passion, our care factor, or our concerns. So I would challenge everybody to think about ways in which they can engage with their community, their friends, their family, their workplace, and talk to them about ways in which they can help. Simple things like we've talked about tonight, ways in which everybody can help join the conversation to become part of the movement to help koalas. And it's that by increasing that movement, by increasing the volume of concern, we can influence decisions so that more favourable decisions are made on behalf of koalas. It's not too late. I want to close by having a quote from a wonderful conservation photographer called Christina Mittermeier. And she said, "The secret to holding on to hope is to share it with others." So take the message, take the wonderful messages that the Wildlife Watcher program and all the research that's being done, take it and share it and expand it so that we can get this movement going to become bigger and bigger. And let's get some momentum going so that we can really make a positive change. It's not too late. Thank you very much.
That was a very, very nice call to action. Now, there's a few other things you can actually do. The team here have actually built a number. You can actually scan that QR code and it's going to add a contact to your phone. So in the awful unlikely moment that if you have actually spotted, you're driving and you see a koala, let's make it easy for you at the moment that you need it the most. So resources like this are the way that we don't have to expect you to remember things. I forget things sometimes. So this is a great way if you just have it there when you need it. You can actually definitely make a difference yourself. And David, I think you did a fabulous job of answering a couple of the questions that had come in on the chat. With the people who are online, what can I do? Also people in the room in terms of what you can do. But there is something you can do in the room tonight if you feel like it. You can actually grab a tree from the team. So in the break, I would encourage you to have a conversation about trees, what you can actually do. And for people who are online and living locally, you can actually go in and actually collect a tree at the Malula River Landcare, and you'll just need to use that code word to actually get it. So it's not like you miss out just because you're online tonight, but those of us who are in the room might actually be able to sneak home, and certainly for me, I'll be able to go and guerrilla plant one out in the creek, but I didn't say that. So I'll invite you for a moment. So for those that need a quick sort of drink break or would just like to go and actually talk to the team, because as David said, they've got information out there. You've also got the teams who are planting trees all the time. So we'll be back in 10 minutes time for those that just want to have a quick shaking and move around. So with no further ado, we're going to continue to move forward. We've already heard from 3 really fabulous speakers, from innovating and finding approaches to find even more koalas, and you can see that Ramon's team's just getting better and better at detecting and actually finding them. There are a heap of questions for all of our speakers, from the effort from council and what they're actually doing, and I just love the fact that David's speech just got straight to here's what you can actually do, and I think he knocked out 2 questions in one. And David, there are people now saying, how can we contact you? So be prepared, the questions are coming your way. So for everyone, please keep firing the questions in. But now I'd like to actually invite Dr. Amber Willett, who works at the Australia Zoo in the Wildlife Hospital, to come and share a little bit about the fabulous work that they actually do. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this, this big space that's happening with, collaboration and joining people together that are really passionate about koalas. I'm probably most well known, I suppose, for my role at the Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital. I've been there for 18 years. I'm one of the senior vets and I coordinate the research there, so I get to collaborate with lots of wonderful people in this room in both the rehab and research space. And also wear some other hats where I work with field ecologists and do a lot of stuff in the actual field, looking at improving health of koala populations throughout parts of southeast Queensland and New South Wales. But today I'm going to talk to you about a little project that we've had running at the hospital. And it's basically looking at what happens after we rehabilitate koalas. Is it successful? Do they do well once they're released? And what sort of injuries can koalas be treated and recover from in care that can then continue to go on and continue their recovery in the wild and go on and reproduce? Like, what are the limits for koalas, I suppose, is the big picture. And we're also kind of evaluating with this project, what is the value of wildlife rehabilitation to koala conservation. So as part of that, we were funded for a 3-year project by the department, and that was focused around monitoring up to 12 koalas post-release. We exceeded that, and we actually ended up monitoring 16 koalas in that period of time. For anyone who knows about monitoring koalas, it's quite resource heavy. You need to go out and track those animals regularly, recatch them, check collars, so it's quite an intensive project. So 16 was quite a lot of animals to manage over a couple of years. And we wanted to look, I suppose, a bit deeper at what are key factors in our rehabilitation process that help improve the outcomes for koalas. And another little element that I won't talk about tonight is also gauging community attitudes towards koalas, rehabilitation, and whether they're flexible in improving their environment for koalas. So I thought I'd just introduce some of the animals to you because, they're all very special, and these animals, get into everybody's hearts that work with them closely. And some of these animals had been in care with us for 19 months, so long periods of time. And also I wanted to highlight that koalas have many faces, and you have really handsome and very beautiful koalas, and then you have those that are a little questionable on the appearance, like poor Anzac over in the corner there. But they're all really important, and this project was about, ensuring their survival and highlighting how important they could be to our populations. So, anyone who's worked in the rehab space or rescue space know there are some common reasons that koalas come in to rehabilitation centres. Obviously, traumatic injuries, orphaning, those sorts of things. And we sort of tried to narrow down a couple of three cohorts of animals that we could sort of study within those three areas of interest. So one was largely looking at severe trauma, and that's very resource heavy to treat these animals and rehabilitate them. So it's really important to help us evaluate whether our efforts are worth it in the end, and how long those koalas can go on and live after release. We looked at animals that did have vision compromise. That was a really key little baby of mine that I wanted to put to rest to, evaluate how well koalas can do with partial vision. Because it's probably not their key sense as to how they're moving through a landscape. They use other senses. It's important, but it's not the main thing like some other species would. So we wanted to monitor how well those animals could go post-release, and also looking at animals that are orphaned, and they take a huge amount of resources from our wildlife carers, and sometimes they're spending months and over a year potentially in care before they're released. So I'll sort of skip past the treatment stuff. Obviously there was acute treatment of injuries with these animals, a lot of time in and out of ICU for a lot of them, and it was very heavily resourced, and you get very attached to these animals. But another key part of our process was getting these animals into a pre-release setting that was going to set them up for being back out in the wild again. And we're really fortunate at the Wildlife Hospital to have some wonderful plantation pens, and we have very large mature trees in there and lots of different tree types, and that really sets koalas up for being ready to go back to the wild. So we had about 80% of our on average, our koalas that were being monitored in this program were spending at least 3 months in, 5 minutes, at least 3 months in care. And as I said, some of them up to 19 months, so huge amounts of time. Almost all of them went through a period of plantation time, and you can see that went up to 8.5 months, 34 weeks that we sometimes had koalas in and out of our plantation for. So huge efforts to get these animals back into the wild. And just an interesting note, which is something that wasn't part of this study, but it kind of came into its own when we had to monitor these animals, is that there are some that needed to be moved to different areas for release, because their original area wasn't going to be safe to go back to. So with the monitoring, we obviously, all the koalas that were released were ear tagged and microchipped as per normal hospital protocol, but we also fitted them with VHF and GPS logging collars. And so they're fairly lightweight, small collars. And we started off with collars that we did have to retrieve to gather GPS download data from. And we moved into a space where we were starting to look at using satellite GPS upload collars, which was very nice because we had a lovely dashboard that we can check on the koalas every single day. And that was nice to have key individuals around different areas being monitored. Once they were released, they were tracked at least twice a week for the first 2 weeks to just ensure that they were coping okay, and then monthly. And our monitoring period, for some of the animals was at least a year. One actually, which I didn't put in here, was a little bit longer than that. And we aimed to try and recatch them at around the 6-month period, and again at the end of their monitoring period, with the aim that we could monitor them for up to 12 months each. So basically, the crux of it is that the majority of the koalas that were put through that rehab process and released did really well. We did have, a lot of our koalas were monitored for more than 3 months, and like I said, some for over a year, but we did have a couple of deaths during the study. This probably isn't unexpected from an ecology perspective, and obviously it's never nice to hear that you've lost one of your animals. But the key thing is that the 2 koalas that died in that study, they had been out for months. So we can clearly say that the reason they were in rehabilitation did not contribute to why they died. It was other factors, and it was alluded to in one of our previous talks that a pool was involved in one of those animals. And the other one, unfortunately, we never ascertained a cause of death, but it was 8 months after he was released. And then the other one was an animal that didn't do well immediately after release. So we were there able to get that animal back into care. Unfortunately, his injuries or illnesses were too severe and he did need euthanizing. So unfortunately, there were some losses, but this is important for us to understand and evaluate what are the risk factors for those animals. We did see all of the animals put on weight and body condition that we monitored. We had breeding in some of our females, which was wonderful. We had one female, she went through and weaned her young, that little one on the back up there. And one of our most important animals, I suppose, that was in care with us for the longest, we could see that she continued to improve after release in terms of her brain injury status. So we put a lot of investment into this animal to making sure we felt she was competent climbing trees and moving through our plantation, and she continued to heal her brain injury after care and after release. And, she was monitored for a year, and you could virtually not detect that she had that severe brain injury now. And we were able to ascertain that she was part of a mating event. We haven't seen a joey yet, but hopefully that will, give us confidence that she will continue to breed. And the other thing too is that what we found with our animals that had vision compromise, so I'm talking animals that might have lost an eye or had really severe scarring on their eyes after chlamydial infection was resolved, or that had some evidence of cataract. Those animals did really well after release. One of them we monitored for 18 months and she had fairly advanced cataracts. So it does kind of drive home that koalas don't just rely on that sense when they're moving through a landscape. She was also interesting that we had to move her to a new environment and she still continued to do well. So most of our koalas stayed really close to their release point for a period of time, and some moved off very quickly. So we think that's probably to do with age class more than anything, and some key independent traits about koalas. Move through that one quickly. I just want to show this very quickly. So this was one of our young orphaned animals that had not been independent in the wild before. And do you just press the middle to make that play? Oh, here we go. So he was one of these koalas that really stuck to where he was released for a long time. 4 months he went up and down and up and down and up and down this little corridor until finally he became a man and he decided to disappear out into the landscape and set up a home range. So he was another one that we monitored for 12 months and he's got a very stable home range out through there. So very quickly, what we can conclude is that, most rehabilitated koalas, the effort that we put in, they will do well post-release. And it's our job in the rehabilitation space to make sure that we get those animals to a point where we feel confident that they're going to do well after release. Our head trauma injury patient, she continued to improve in time, so that just justifies that time can heal a lot of injuries. Relocation didn't appear to affect our survival, and ultimately the effort is really worth it. And I think anyone who's data orientated, you need that data sometimes to help validate that, even though we all know it in our hearts that it's a really important part of koala conservation. So that's what this project was really about. And there's some acknowledgements, some wonderful people, some in the room that were really important to making this project happen. And obviously the funding was vitally important. So thank you.
If you have any questions for Amber, please do put them into the Slido for us. Our next speaker is doing some absolutely fabulous work and in such a very different way in terms of actually seeing if we can find vaccine cures, or certainly not a cure, but a way to sort of treat and actually look after animals. So I would actually like to invite Professor Peter Timms to stage and had a great deal of joy learning about some of the work and the naming of koalas that his granddaughter's been doing as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll try and tell you the story, a little bit of science. Sorry, there's a little bit of science coming at this time of night. Why didn't I do that? Oh.
So yeah, as others have said, I'm just standing here up on the stage taking all the credit. Everything that's good, I'll take credit for it, and everything that's bad is the rest of the team working in the university. So why develop a vaccine for chlamydia? It's pretty obvious, I think, but nevertheless, sometimes, of course, chlamydia causes two main diseases in koalas, and Amber's shown you a couple of pictures of some of them. Certainly in female koalas, causing urogenital tract infections. This is what you see what's called dirty tail or wet bottom. Just a reminder that internally, as well as causing reproductive tract blockages, they can cause large cysts, and these are quite painful in their own right, as well as resulting in reproductive problems. Of course, and I'm going to show you some pictures of the vaccine used in koalas with ocular disease. So it can be, as Amber's already shown you a picture there, can cause it in one eye or both eyes. It can start as mild conjunctivitis, but eventually it can cause severe scarring so that the animal can't see at all. So just some numbers. Despite the good work that all the wildlife hospitals do, and people like Amber and all the people at Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital, more than half of those animals that come into them, and these are numbers, need to be humanely euthanized. Chlamydial disease accounts for, depending on the areas, 40% of those animals. That's pretty serious. Even though the vets are doing absolutely everything they can to treat them, the chlamydial disease, the success rate is still not as good as it should be. And here's some of the numbers that can be quoted sometimes. Only 20% of the animals that are treated can be released. That's pretty average. And of course, females are having the worst type of disease, given that it's reproductive tract. And sometimes their success rate for females can be as low as 12%. So clearly, chlamydial disease is a pretty major challenge. So what are the treatments? Antibiotics, I won't say too much, except we can throw antibiotics at them, but koalas keep trying to break the antibiotics we give them down, so we have to treat them for day after day after day, and eventually that causes trouble with their own gut microbiome or the gut bacteria. I've got a picture here of the next generation. That's my granddaughter, Carla there. As good as the job we're doing, it's the next generation that we really need. It's really going to make a difference as well. So vaccination is not the only answer, but hopefully it can be one of the solutions that can make a difference to saving more koalas and getting a better reproductive rate. So you've probably never thought about it, but there are multiple vaccines we're talking about. Some of the vaccines would maybe with healthy koalas that are chlamydia negative to stop them getting infections. It's almost impossible. There are no vaccines on the planet that do that. Animals that look otherwise healthy, but they're actually infected, to make sure that we reduce their infection level, because if we reduce their infection level, it reduces their chance of transmitting, but also reduces the chance that they'll go from looking healthy to one day becoming diseased. And I'll tell you a very short story about whether or not you can even vaccinate diseased animals. 5 years ago, I would have said you couldn't, but it looks like that possibly you might be able to do some of that. Okay, this has been a 10-year journey. It's probably been a 20-year journey. I don't like to think how long it's been, but it's been a long time. And I'm not going to tell you all that information, but I'm just going to give you some snippets of what we've been able to do. So here's an example of one vaccine trial. So it's just going to show that it can reduce the infection level. So remember I said it can reduce the infection level, perhaps not stop disease. And so here's the unvaccinated animals. And for instance, in this case, 29% of the animals that didn't get vaccinated ended up with infections, whereas in the vaccinated group, only 5%. So you'd be pretty happy with that. But as well as that, the level of infection is different. So in the unvaccinated animals, they've got lots of copies of the chlamydia, whereas much lower numbers. So this is pretty promising. What about animals with disease? I'm going to show you this because it's a nice, good news story. This project was done at Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital. So we took some animals that had eye infections, and normally Amber would treat them with antibiotics. In this particular trial, they weren't given any antibiotics. So we're just trying to see whether or not vaccination could basically replace antibiotic treatment. And they were given a scoring system here as to how oops, it's pretty tricky. So here's some of the results. So this is these animals, and I'm going to show you a picture of one of the animals in a minute. So this is an animal. So this is its two eyes. In this particular case, one eye was diseased and the other one wasn't. And this is the vaccine being given at day 0. This is across a period of weeks, and it shows you how much disease it's got. Of course, or not surprisingly perhaps, the eyes get a bit worse for a while. It's a vaccine, it's not a drug. It's going to take a couple of weeks to work. But hopefully I can convince you in this animal, for instance, in that eye, while it got worse for a while, then it got better. And here's a series of the different animals. This took a long time to do this trial, but here's an animal with 2 eyes with disease, and hopefully I can convince you that they're improving. I'm not here to tell you that the vaccine is 100% effective. It's not. There aren't any vaccines on the planet that are 100% effective. And here, for instance, there were 7 animals, and 6 of the 7 did well, and 1 of them didn't do well. So it's not perfect, but it's not bad. I'm going to show you a picture now of an animal that came in with disease, got treated with the vaccine, then 8 weeks later, and you're meant to go, oh, isn't that fantastic? Okay, you're right. So here it is coming in, and it left. Believe it or not, it's the same photo, the same animal. And in that particular case, I think I can convince you, at least with that animal, that vaccination seemed to have a pretty positive effect. I'm going to flick over that just so I don't get in trouble out here. I'm going to show you, we've also interested in seeing bigger numbers of animals. And so we've been doing large studies, of course, in the Moreton Bay area for a long time. And here we've got hundreds and hundreds of animals that have been vaccinated, 200 of them, and 600 that haven't. So the question is, over that long period of time, in 8 years, does it make a difference? And so here we went looking for the main 2 questions. Does vaccination lower the level of disease? In fact, does it also lower the level of death due to disease? So these are the big things that matter at the end of the day. You can do some modelling numbers to see how effective a vaccine needs to be. And so these numbers come out at 45% if you only give 20% coverage, or this 59%. So I'm going to tell you in a minute that the numbers of protection we get is above that. So it suggests that if you vaccinate a group of animals or a population of animals, you can make a difference to the whole population. Oops, sorry. So this is a survival curve. So this is the unvaccinated animals are in yellow. So this is their 50% survival. So if you look at them across a period of time in their age and years, it's telling you that eventually anything up to nearly 50% won't make it through this period. But hopefully I can convince you again, in blue is the number of vaccinated animals, which do a lot better than the unvaccinated animals. And this is done with hundreds of animals. So it tells you it's not just 1 or 2 animals, if you look at animals over a period of time. So people ask, when will the vaccine be ready to be available? And my answer is always Christmas. I'm just not sure which Christmas. So where are we up to? It's been going on a long time. I'm not going to read through that. But at the end of the day, we're aiming to have a vaccine that's widely available and has been through the registration process. This is an important thing. At the moment, we're restricted by doing research projects, and we are restricted by the numbers of animals. I know people want to vaccinate more animals. That's not always possible because of the rules and regulations. So we're hoping to get to that end. I think we've made a lot of progress. We've gone through a lot of trials. We're doing big numbers of animals. We found a partner to make the vaccine, and so we're now moving through this next phase, which is where you take a research vaccine and make it into one that the veterinary regulators will approve. It's not an easy journey, and we're getting there, I think, at the moment. So I'll just finish by suggesting that we've got lots and lots of supporters, and hopefully the vaccine, while not 100% effective, I think it's going to make a huge difference overall to chlamydial disease in this important koala. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Timms. It's amazing to learn of the work and the continued progress you're actually getting in the trial. Now, our last speaker for tonight is Rachel Williams, and Rachel works for the Department of Environment, Science and Innovation. But Rachel also volunteers in a host of sort of land care issues when she's not working. So Rachel tonight is just going to talk about some of the work that she does in department, just one of the many projects that she does. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So my name's Rachel Williams, and I am the Program Coordinator for Koala Habitat Partnerships and Programs, which is the best job in the world. Before I start, I would like to also add my acknowledgement to the traditional owners on the country on which we're meeting today, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that ongoing connection to land, sea, sky and country. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to be able to participate in this forum this evening to talk about some of the initiatives that the Queensland Government is doing for koalas in southeast Queensland. This forum has delved deep into the world of koalas, exploring cutting-edge research and the tireless efforts of wildlife carers in the region. I want to extend my gratitude to Griffith University for hosting this vital event, as well as the other speakers tonight, in order to provide a platform for knowledge sharing and collaboration in koala conservation. And as we reflect on the research and the care initiatives discussed tonight, it becomes evident that habitat restoration is a cornerstone of efforts to safeguard koala populations in southeast Queensland. So my presentation will focus on the critical role of habitat restoration in creating resilient and sustainable landscapes for koalas to thrive. So the Southeast Queensland Koala Conservation Strategy 2020 to 25 seeks to address the ongoing decline of koala populations across the region through targeted conservation efforts. The primary objectives of the strategy is to stabilise and increase koala populations, improve habitat quality and connectivity, and mitigate the threats to koalas and their habitats. One of the targets within the strategy is to commence rehabilitation to restore 10,000 hectares of koala habitat. And I must admit, this target keeps me awake at night. This is a significant stretch target that will go beyond the life of this 5-year strategy. In the strategy, there is an acknowledgement that the Queensland Government cannot deliver on these targets or the actions in the strategy alone. The efforts by speakers and attendees here tonight, by local governments, wildlife carers, wildlife hospitals, researchers, and everyone can all make a difference. The strategy is fundamentally underpinned on a collaborative approach and a collaborative effort. So my team, the Koala Habitat Partnerships and Programs team, therefore focus our efforts on contributing towards the target of restoring 10,000 hectares of koala habitat. Our funding, our purpose, and all of the activities and partnerships that we do are focused around this target. The team currently undertakes landscape level habitat restoration on 8 properties across southeast Queensland, totalling over 505 hectares of estate. Over the past 10 years, there have been over 82,800 trees planted across all of these properties. So on the left map, we have the 4 northern southeast Queensland properties. We have 152 hectares over 4 blocks of land at Cromahurst, which I'll delve into further as a case study. We've got 117 hectares across 2 properties at Peachester, and we have 40 hectares at Lacey's Creek. On the right-hand side, it shows our properties which are on the southern section of southeast Queensland. And we have a small block of 7.5 hectares in Capalaba West. There's 127 hectares in Ford Road, Pre-Stale. And this property has already transitioned to the Parks Estate, so our team no longer looks after this one. It's now considered as a conservation reserve. And there are 2 properties in Mount Cotton. We have a large 27 hectare property that my team is based at, and a small 13 hectare property, and another property in Sheldon, which is 45 hectares. So before I do continue in sharing the work that is being undertaken by my team, I would like to acknowledge my field team. In the early days, the team consisted of 7 officers to implement this program, but we are now operating with just 3 wildlife officers, who is Mitch on the left here, and then Riley and Ross. They undertake all of the on-ground maintenance and monitoring of the 8 properties, and the level of effort to manage 505 hectares requires a shout out to these team members, who fundamentally form the backbone of our restoration activities. So across the 8 properties that we manage, the field team look after weed control, both mechanical and chemical. They do infill planting. They have to deal with fencing, asset management. 3 of the properties have houses on them. They all have sheds. They have internal bridges, and we have compliance issues. So they maintain the internal tracks, which includes erosion and sediment control. They maintain all their equipment, and they undertake the monitoring of the restoration plantings. So let's dive into the case study of one of our properties located at Cromahurst. So this property was purchased in 2013 by DESI and spans an area of 125 hectares over 4 plots. So 70 hectares of existing vegetation occurs on the property. Cromehurst was selected as a property due to its proximity within an ecological corridor and connectivity in relation to, so it directly borders the northern section of Glasshouse Mountains National Park, and it has direct southern borders to Cromehurst State Forest. Other protected areas geographically close by include the Mary Cairncross Reserve and the Upper Malula Nature Refuge to the north. We have the Dulaka National Park to the east, and there are a number of Sunshine Coast Regional Council environmental reserves around the property. So Cromehurst presented a unique opportunity to showcase the practical application of landscape scale restoration principles. With 70 hectares already vegetated, a focus of this project included expanding the koala habitat based on the pre-clearing regional ecosystems in terms of the species selection. The habitat enhancement measures such as weed management and tree planting, so 54.5 hectares of restoration planting occurred across 18 planting compartments. And that's over 20,100 koala habitat trees were planted on this property. We established ecological corridors to facilitate the movement of koalas and other wildlife throughout the landscape, and we monitor and evaluate to ensure the effectiveness of the restoration efforts over time. So other management activities that have occurred on this property include pest management of deer and fox control from the Sunshine Coast Regional Council. Fauna surveys have been undertaken by the Queensland Naturalist Club. Koala surveys have been undertaken by the QPWS Koala Research and Monitoring Team, and Richmond birdwing butterfly surveys have been undertaken by the QPWS Threatened Species Operations Team. So as part of the management of the property, grazing agreements were established with the local state high school and a neighbouring landholder on 2 of the 4 lots across the property. So allowing cattle grazing in the property offered several benefits when managed effectively. Strategic grazing helps control the growth of invasive plant species, and in the case at Cromehurst, helps reduce the pasture grasses, which otherwise outcompete the tree plantings. And while allowing cattle grazing on the property has offered certain property management benefits, there's still a significant resource effort invested by the field team and contractors in slashing and managing the pasture grass on the property. So the cattle grazing was not the only solution. The monitoring and analysis of tree growth data in koala habitat restoration efforts provides valuable insights and enables the team to assess the success of our restoration initiatives. Overall, the analysis of tree growth data shows that Cromehurst was the most successful of the 7 koala habitat restoration properties that were monitored in terms of both tree height and the diameter breast height. This may be due to the rich soils of the property, as well as the limited natural regeneration that was occurring due to the pasture grass. But then potentially the soil had an opportunity to invest in the tree growth and also pasture grasses. Koala habitat restoration offers a myriad of benefits to overall biodiversity beyond just a koala population. By restoring ecosystems suitable for koalas, we simultaneously create favourable conditions for a diverse range of flora and fauna. Additionally, increased vegetation cover and habitat complexity resulting from restoration efforts can contribute to improved soil health, water retention, and carbon sequestration, further enriching the ecological landscape. Ultimately, koala habitat restoration acts as a catalyst for broader biodiversity conservation efforts. As you can see from the spatial imagery over time, evidence of the significant koala habitat restoration efforts undertaken on the Cromehurst property over the past 10 years can be seen from these pictures. While challenges such as competition from pasture grasses, limiting HR resources over time, and the occasional grazing from rogue cattle, the collective efforts of the KHPP team and our partners have made significant progress in restoring and contributing to koala habitat at Cromehurst. Looking ahead, continued collaboration, adaptive management, and stakeholder engagement will be essential in ensuring the long-term viability of koala populations and their habitats in this region. As you can see from the photo on the right, this is Jessie, the resident koala, along with our wildlife officer, Ayla, and we hope that more koalas will continue to move into the property over time. In summing up, the KHPP team continue to manage the koala habitat restoration estate. Other projects coordinated by our team, which is tied to the SEQ Koala Conservation Strategy, include the partnership with Queensland Trust for Nature to restore koala habitat with private landholders, which is currently in the process of being extended for another 4 years. And so QTFN manage 400 hectares of privately owned koala habitat restoration. Our team also coordinates a project with Healthy Land and Water in relation to koala threat management initiatives, which is a 4-year project to identify 10 koala hotspots in southeast Queensland and develop projects with local government areas to reduce the threat in those locations. As the team transitions to restore habitat on state lands, we are in the planning stages of a koala restoration project at Wittenbar, which is a 50-hectare section of Lamington National Park on the Gold Coast hinterland, in partnership with the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Binnaburra team and the local First Nations people. And finally, while koala habitat restoration is a vital component of koala conservation efforts, it is acknowledged that it is even more important to conserve and protect the existing koala habitat across our region. The continued clearing of core koala habitat poses a significant threat to the survival of koala populations in the region, but by working together through legislative frameworks, utilising state-of-the-art koala habitat mapping, and the power of the community, we can ensure that future generations continue to see koalas in the wild in southeast Queensland. Thank you.
All right, and a big thank you to all 6 speakers who have very generously given up their time to be out here to talk to you tonight. And what we will actually do now, so again, this is about your last opportunity to feed questions in. I can tell you very safely we are inundated with questions. There are so many. So don't forget, you can actually download this to keep the Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital as your contact. And speakers, could I invite you all to please come up to the stage? And give them a big round of applause, everyone. And if you haven't, you need to grab your koala food trees on the way out and help contribute. As far as I'm concerned, any form of conservation is a shared responsibility. And the more we can get more people to actually realise just how important nature is for our own health and well-being, the better off we're actually going to be. And sometimes talking to yourselves isn't always, sometimes we're not the people that we actually need to be speaking to. And we really do actually acknowledge that. Now, many questions have come in, so in advance I am going to apologise if we can't get through them all, but we will do our level best as we actually get going. So I may or may not take them in order, because it might just be a bit more fun to just sort of jump around and see what we can actually do. So before we start, there have been many comments coming into the chat just saying thank you both for the amazing work that you do and all of the hope that you've actually generated and actually given out. So the first question I've actually got is around translocation, and there's been a few questions in here in relation to, and I probably won't even say it right, Karawatha Forest and Tui Forest. And this may or may not be sort of directed at anyone individually, so some of you might be actually quite happy to actually speak that. So is translocation to reserves a possibility?
Is this one working? Okay. Look, I'm not going to speak on behalf of where is appropriate, but I can tell you from experience that translocating of koalas can be very successful. There are a few things that need to be brought into the equation. You need to know a little bit about the population that may already be resident in that area, and is it best for that population to be introducing new animals? And then also looking at, is it important ecologically and from a conservation perspective to introduce animals to those particular areas. So there's a lot of factors that need to be looked into. There's disease impacts that need to be examined. There's what are the best age classes to be looked at. Is there potential for emigration and movement of koalas out of there if the population becomes bolstered? But, translocation is a used method for many species to conserve species. And koalas, we're moving into the space, I think, now where that is a much more accepted potential method for helping us manage koalas in our part of the country.
And why you've still got, so hold the mic there if you don't mind, Amber. There's a question just around, did the collars get removed at the end of the studies?
Yes, they absolutely did. So thank you for pointing that out. 10 minutes is not long enough for me to talk about that study. But yes, absolutely. All of the collars got removed. The collars also had a weak link in them, and we did have a number of animals that got the collars off, sometimes even after 5 days. So yes, no koalas were left with collars on in the environment. They were all removed, whether by themselves or by us.
And while you've got the mic, is there a way that you can actually help at the hospital if you're aged under 18?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a volunteer program, so I'm certainly not the right person to speak to about that, but contact the volunteers' email. So if you guys just go to our website, you can find that. There's an application process, and we do occasionally have younger volunteers coming through. Certainly you do have to be of a minimum age. I can't tell you what that is, but I think under 18 there is still some exceptions.
All right, Peter, this is a question for you. Chlamydia has been a critical disease in the past, and it's become quite sort of serious recently. Is there any possibilities that if you develop a vaccine, that the disease might sort of, I'm going to use the words mutate or change?
Yeah, we're very interested in that question, and we've looked at that possibility over that 8 to 10 year project, and at the moment there is no suggestion that vaccination will push mutations or cause some changes like people are worried about and other sorts of things. So no, we don't think that's a major problem at all.
Beautiful. And keep the mic. Is the vaccine being refined during the trial?
Yeah, there's two sorts of things going on. We are continually refining and improving the vaccine, and we'll keep doing that. The problem is, however, that when you make a vaccine to get a registration process, you have to stick to a certain version of the vaccine to get it approved. So it's a combination of things. We have to choose a version of the vaccine that stays the same and gets tested as much as possible, and that's the one we'll get approved. But in parallel to that, we'll be always making versions 2, 3, 4, 5, a bit like your flu vaccine and so on. It'll get better and better each year. But at the moment, we've got one particular version we're pushing ahead.
That's amazing. And there is so much involved in vaccines. I went to a workshop that was very, very long and was very, very confused, given I don't have much of a fantastic science background. So it's very detailed as you do it. Now, I'm not quite sure who to pose these next questions to, so I might ask for a volunteer to tackle one of these for me. So how many different types of eucalypts do koalas eat?
Depends where. The answer no one wants to hear. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think some population have been found to survive on one species, more in the south, Victoria and South Australia. And here there's now, through the scats, really cool way of looking at the different species present in each scat, and then you have to kind of sample the whole population, and that there can be dozens of different eucalyptus species, but also interestingly, maybe everyone in this room knows, but the koala eat a lot of other species, not just eucalyptus. So you can go quite broad and have a look at what they nibble on.
And so for those that are doing the tree plantings, like which types of species are we actually planting, and are we planting them in response to bushfires?
Well, in response to bushfire, I think it depends on who's doing the planting. But there's different things that are happening. Of course, some people have had selected their tree species based on the presence of koala cats under the tree. And that indicates that koala were in that tree. That could be for feeding, that could be for shelter. But both of them are quite important to koala, so that's okay. But more recently, because of those new molecular way of determining what koala eat, I think we're going to be able to inform more and more what species are used in each part of Australia. And there's been quite a few hundred of samples analyzed by UQ, that gives us now a little bit more precision. But interestingly, there's also work coming out of the Australian National University that really points towards the fact that not all trees are equal within a species. And so there are trees that have more ability to defend themselves because, koala eat them. So this is the opposite, side of the story, is that you want actually trees that are not that good at defending. so produce less toxin and are more nutritious to koala. And that's new work that is being done, and that is pushing people to actually collect the seeds, not just of the species and a local species, because you also want the local tree to be adapted to the local environment, but they push it to the extent that they collect that the tree that are eaten by koala. So sometimes we call them family trees. Maybe that's just us. But we see some trees that are just very, very well used. And there are many koala that come, and they come repetitively to that specific trees. And then we know that that's really a good food. And so some people push to the extent that they collect the seed there and they grow the tree from those family trees.
And David, would you like to add anything to the trees?
Can probably add a little bit to it. In one of the resources that we use when considering a tree mix for planting, first of all, we don't plant all koala trees. We tend to look at a habitat plantation of all sorts of things. But the guideline that we use quite a bit is a resource that DESI has, which is a regional ecosystem report, which can be generated by anybody. And if you Google regional ecosystem report, it's reasonably easy to find. Not necessarily easy to navigate through it, but with a bit of patience, you can end up with a list of trees or plant species that might be appropriate to the particular location that you're talking about. So we use that along with other pieces of information, local knowledge, and other things that help us develop a mix of trees.
That's beautiful. Kate, my next question's for you. Does the Sunshine Coast Council use or implement any form of sort of collective environmental impact assessments when they're considering development?
That's a very good question. So I can't answer it because I don't work in development services, so I'm not an expert in that field. But I believe that they are unable to. But I will check, and I'll come back to you.
That is we're going to be very happy to get back to you. I do like to pose some questions. We don't mean to not answer it, but as I explained, the system is incredibly complex, and the more you're inside it, the more you actually understand all of this, to really get a true appreciation that each individual here, we're bounded into the parts of the work, that we actually do. I'll keep the mic there, Kate. The Sunshine Coast Regional Plan is one of the best mechanisms to protect habitat. How can we encourage our current elected representatives to protect koalas using this?
That's also a good one. I mean, we're at a really amazing time in terms of we've just had our local government elections, council's developing our new planning scheme. This is an opportunity for community to weigh in and make sure that their voices are heard in terms of representation of threatened species in our planning scheme. The best way to approach that is by getting in contact with your local divisional councillor. My question to all of you is, do you know who that is? Because they're the person, because you're living within a local government setting, which means you have a huge amount of power to be able to tell your local government representative what is important to you as communities. So pick up the phone and talk to them. They then tell us what the community want, and we're able to act. So I think that's a really important tool is getting in touch directly with your new local divisional councillor, letting them know what's important to you.
The Local Government Association actually told me that 40% of people elected in are new, so it is an ideal time, and that's a fantastic, excellent suggestion. Rachel, the next question is actually for you. DESI at Cromhurst, are you monitoring for koala population presence there?
So historically, we have had the koala survey team, the DESI koala survey team, come out, and the methodology is very difficult. We do transects across the property, and we didn't find any koalas. But when my team go out regularly, there is Jessie, the koala, that's always there. And other than that, that's the only koala that we've seen there on site. The team only visit the property every 3 weeks, and they spend 3 days there at a time. So there could be other koalas travelling through the property, but we're just not sure.
Now,
eventually, I'd like to work with. Part of going forward on our properties, I would like to do drone surveys and dog detection, and that's in my budgets for next financial year.
That's great. And we have a number of reserves that sit around that Rachel showed on the map that were in purple, and the majority of those have regular koalas sighted through fauna cameras or through people visiting the sites as well.
One of the monitoring koalas that we monitored was actually from that area. Yeah, so you got a guaranteed one there as well.
I don't know who's going to answer this one for me, but let's see who knows this because it's a good, fun question. How does the endangerment of koalas negatively impact Australia's environment and ecosystem? I'll repeat it. Yep. How does the endangerment of koalas negatively impact Australia's environment and ecosystems? And maybe if I flip it around, if the koala disappeared, would we notice it? I might be misinterpreting that, and forgive me if I put it back in if I've got it wrong.
I mean, as a result of the uplisting of the koala, federal, state government, huge amount of funding has been funneled towards koala conservation, and that's excellent for koalas. But when you look at all of the other species that are equally as endangered but not receiving a similar amount of funding to be able to allow community organisations, local governments, researchers to investigate the causes and address those impacts, that's certainly a negative interaction, I suppose, for the balance of the ecosystem. But then there are also projects that are achieved through that huge amount of koala funding that then benefit all of those species as well. So that's a potential answer to that question.
Anyone else want to have a go at that one? It's a tricky question. It's a really good question. Oh, I love it. David, this is a question I'm going to pose to you. What can someone who's under 18 and living remotely do to help?
I think that's a fantastic question. Living remotely, there's lots and lots of information available online to learn about so many aspects of koalas' behaviour and where they are and threats, and so there's real opportunities to learn because there is so much out there. Under 18 is not something that's we encourage people to who are under 18 to be involved, and we've got a fantastic little ambassador for koalas sitting up the back of the room there, and Milani is 8 going on 9, and what she does is absolutely amazing with the little blogs that she does, and she's the perfect example of someone who's just an absolute sponge of drawing information in and using it and talking to her peers in school, in her class, and by the information that she puts out, it's absolutely astonishing the power of a young mind and a young voice. So everybody of any age can join that and become a little ambassador. You know, don't wait till you're 18. Certainly with our plannings, we encourage families to come along with young kids and be involved in our plannings. We would want them to have parental accompaniment or guidance at a planning, but we certainly love to have them involved. So there's just a couple. There's probably a lot more.
I love it.
Can I just add, because we have a great supporter who does live overseas. She's called Mathilde, and she's been organizing several koala fests, and she does wonderful art about koala. So she can really from the US actually support koala action on the ground.
What a fabulous story. So it just shows there are more than one way that we can actually definitely do it. It's amazing, isn't it? Rachel, can I pose this next question to you? What's the long-term management plans for the restoration blocks that you're currently doing today?
So as I said, the Ford Road Conservation Block has turned into Natural Area Estate as part of Parks and Wildlife Service. We've got one other property, the smaller one at Capalaba West, is being transitioned over to Brisbane City Council. The neighbouring property is also a koala offset property, so they will gradually, we'll be handing that over to them to manage and include in their offset estate. The remaining 8 properties will be, or 7 properties will be transition to become private area estates. So we are working together in collaboration with Queensland Trust for Nature to actually transition these properties over to nature refuges, and so they will be on the market soon.
Perfect. Amber, can I ask this next question to you? How does citizen science data get used?
Do you mean at the hospital or just in general?
In general, could be either.
Rom's probably better to answer that because you guys do a lot of citizen science.
I've got a lot of questions coming for Rom.
Oh. I could take one of your questions.
How can you train a dog?
Look, yeah, I mean, citizen science, data is crucial to some research projects, absolutely. I mean, there's even just from sightings, that information has been really valuable for assisting with efforts of koala conservation in certain areas. So, you can't underestimate how important it can actually be to assisting with conservation. And, I guess going back to how can one person help, like one person turns into two persons, turns into three people, like every little person can assist with that and all be a citizen science participant. Yeah. And I said, Rom, that those guys do a lot with that, so she probably has more information.
Just that it's often the first source of information, and as much as we would love to be everywhere all the time, we're not. But there's often people who live or who visit different parts, and between all of us, that means we can actually access most of the parts of the environment and record koala and other animals. And this is often the first step for any developer or, to proceed or not proceed into any action, whether it's protection or whether it's development. One of the first steps is to download all those different databases collected by citizen scientists and research and everyone in this room and see, is there a record here? And the next step will be influenced by that first step. So it's really important that there's dots on the map everywhere that koala are. You can make it a fun game and go, to a place you've never been on the weekend, take your Q Wildlife or any other app, iNaturalist, etc., and say, okay, I'm going to, make sure I record 10 new dots this week, and encourage your friend to do the same, and, organize a game against each other if you're competitive, and then really motivate people to record more and more animals, and so that we know where they are and we can protect them.
Yeah, you start to learn the tricks too, like look for the V, look for the scratches. You can actually do a lot. Peter, this question's for you. How often does a koala need to be revaccinated?
Yeah, sure. The vaccine we're trialling is a single-dose vaccine, so that's a benefit of that. And we don't have the absolute answer yet as to whether or not revaccination is essential, but the work we've got would suggest it's probably not, either because they're getting naturally infected out there or because we know the immune response at least lasts for many, many years. So at this point in time, we think that's not an essential part. And we've gone out of our way to make sure that our vaccine is very practical. You can do it very scientific or you can do it very practical. And the practical approach is a single vaccination is going to be the most practical thing out there.
And the question related is, can a koala survive with chlamydia?
Yeah, well, the answer is yes. The number of koalas will get infected and will recover. There's no doubt about that. I think some of the more recent data perhaps suggests that perhaps a lot of the koalas that get infected don't always recover and will get more serious disease. The question that some of the others might be able to answer as well is, does an infection always result in female koalas becoming infertile? And I think the answer is not always, but eventually I think a lot of animals that do get infected will maybe breed for a season or two, but eventually they may become infertile. So I think it depends in different parts of Queensland and it depends in different parts of Australia.
And one final question for you, Peter. Can the vaccine be passed down through genetics into the next generation?
Yeah, I saw that. The answer is unfortunately no. Having said that, there might be a bit of maternal immunity in milk, but we don't for sure know that. But otherwise, it's not a genetically inheritable vaccine at this point in time.
Okay. And the last question I'm going to pose to Kate, is the council working with schools to encourage and educate on koala conservation? And if so, how are you doing this?
Good question. We are unofficially through the Kids in Action program. So the Kids in Action program, as I mentioned in my presentation, is a incredible piece of work that's run out of our team at council, where they engage with hundreds of schools over the last, I think, 15 to 20 years. And actually, Karen's in the audience. So if you do have any specific questions about Kids in Action, you want to raise your hand for me, Karen, and people might want to ask you direct questions. But we have been engaging with Kids in Action, and that's an opportunity to have, through the Environment Projects Day, students come to the Environment Projects Day. They learn about a range of different environmental issues that they might be interested in. The students then go back to their schools. They decide on a topic that they want to dive into a little bit deeper, and then they come back together about 6 months later and they present and teach each other about the issues that they have identified as important to them. And it's all about kids teaching kids. And I think it's a really incredible program. So we've been spending a little bit of time working on that last year. Council also has a natural classroom program where schools can ask for a council officer or someone from a council-related project to come out to the classroom and talk to the students about an issue, whether it's koalas, macropods, turtle care, waste management, bush care, all sorts of different topics can be discussed with the students, and that's how we are reaching out to younger people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.
And
I
did
say it was going to be last question, but I did just want to pose one final question. I'm sorry we can't get through the rest of them all, but David, Rachel, you may also want to comment on this one. What is the process to have your land planted on? So just a bit of an explainer to a landholder, like what's actually involved if they sort of say, yes, I'd love to have some trees planted.
I think it all starts with a conversation to understand what the land is and the area and location and soils and all of those sort of things, and have a discussion about the long-term objectives of the property and conservation values and protecting the plants that get put in the ground and all those sort of things. It's for us, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We take every property that we approach on its merits and develop a plan from there.
And a final question to all speakers. How do you feel about what's been happening on Kangaroo Island? And if you don't know the story and the background to this one, there were trees getting pushed over and footage of koalas falling out of trees. It was halted for a while, but now it's going back ahead with assurances that better practices are going on. So you can either choose to answer or not.
I'm going to take that one. I don't think anybody with a heartbeat would not be absolutely appalled by that vision that we saw, and just horrendous. And we really need to encourage the strengthening of regulations around the ways in which, if trees have to be removed, then there has to be really rigorous controls about the way in which that takes place, because that is just not acceptable.
Just going back to the point that koala are exceptionally hard to spot, so that makes it really hard. And I think it's really where it's important to deploy several different techniques, so that it's like the idea of the Swiss cheese. You don't want everything to line up and a koala being pushed while in a tree.
Yeah, and this just goes to shared responsibility, and we all need to learn how to advocate responsibly and well so that actually it gets heard. Because whilst we can complain on social media and talk to each other in this way, that isn't how government runs. And so advocating correctly and doing it and having heard the process and how, I'm going to go out and learn it and start circulating it so that I can help all of us get more proactive in how we actually come together. So to our 6 speakers who gave up their time to be with us this afternoon and this evening, a big thank you. And for me, I would also like to thank Sunshine Coast Council, who were critical in bringing the event and doing the catering and that side, to all of our stallholders who came out to actually share the work that they do as well. I hope you have interacted with them, take a few screenshots, photos, follow up, because this is where you can actually jump in and help give a helping hand, and I'd love to see more people jumping in and getting involved. I know I myself will be out following a few and taking some footage and talking about what they do. To my team, we're funded by the Queensland Government to help coordinate effort across the southeast corner. And in the room, you've got Kim up the back, Tori down the front, and Louisa. They've worked tirelessly after a weekend where, again, half the team were out at Somerset Dam working with dog owners. If you haven't heard of the Leave It app, there were questions in here tonight around how can I train my dog, and the Leave It app actually has got wildlife training in it. So it teaches avoidance and how to actually stay away from wildlife, along with other things like recall. And also, did you know that there's 4 different types of barking? I didn't. So this is how much we still have to learn about all animals. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight and joining us to be here. It has been wonderful to see not only the number of questions that we couldn't quite get our way through. I know some people have travelled from far and wide. It's been a pleasure hosting you this evening. So thank you. Feel free to stick around just for a little bit and have a bit of a chat. And thanks again for coming.